Okay, I feel like I should be taking registration or something. It feels a bit odd. Welcome to the user behaviour session. This is a panel, so a bit of question time sort of scenario, and it is meant to be very informal. We're going to be firing some questions off at our panellists here. My name's Emma. I'm going to be doing the moderating / referee. We'll see where we get with that. If I can introduce everybody, from the end is Peter Maud, and he's CTO of CRISP, and my boss, so I won't ask him the hard ones. Claire Panter is next, and she's Community Operations Manager for good old Moshi Monsters. And then we have Liz Morgan, who's Community Manager for Patients Like Me, it's a health community. And here we have Vincent Boone, who's Head of Community for Mobile Network GIFGAF. So we've got a good old selection of opinions going on here, and hopefully we'll get some good debate going on user behaviour, which probably for all us community managers is one of our biggest headaches. So hopefully we can share some learnings there. So I'm going to fire straight in, and I'm going to fire a question at Liz here. But the panellists, what we're going to do is if they've got an opinion, they're just going to hopefully give it, or I'll have to go and prod them with a sharp stick. So Liz, what are your tips on getting community members to do what you want them to do?
Certainly something that is applicable to all communities, whether it's Moshi before trying to get the kids to engage, or we're a health community trying to get patients to talk to others and find their way around the site. Some things that we've learned really is to ask our users what they want and use those key opinion leader panels to go back to the community, see what works best for them and what would most engage them. I think using that, if you want a conversation to be started, asking a member to start it rather than a moderator to really have the community be self-sustainable rather than kind of direct your opinion at it.
Fantastic.
Do you use a lot of behind-the-scenes private message stuff to get people involved? Or?
Yeah, certainly. The power users we found really do want to be involved and ask their opinion. And if you even give them a tip, hey, I saw this article, maybe you'd like to share it with the community, they're normally happy to say thanks for finding that and start the conversations themselves. It's much more effective than, say, me going in and posting an article. I'm not a user, I'm a moderator.
Well, what do you do when people consistently try to derail the conversation?
I think the community can handle itself. We take a very light touch moderation approach and recognize that our members are people. They have their own personalities, and sometimes they're not going to get along and they're going to fight. We aim for reconciliation, not resolution. And we also have community tools in place. Rather than having me say, no, you can't say that, you can just hide a post from a certain member so that you're able to control your experience.
And would you ever leave that into the hands of the community members to hide those posts?
Each member can choose their own, can control their own experience and hide posts from others they wish to see. At this point, we really don't go in and we don't screen the conversation to delete things that are derailing.
And Claire over there. You're dealing with a very young age range, and I know dealing with children can sometimes be like herding cats. So what do you do to keep them in line?
I think in that sense it's a lot more straightforward to us, really. If people are trying to derail the conversation, then we can't really let them do it. We would tend to remove those comments, anyone trying to derail it. In terms of getting them engaged, we're very lucky that the kids are they really want to take part in it, kind of asking them any kind of questions, they're really eager to give their opinion across. So in that sense, it's not too difficult for us to engage them, and that's what we want them to do, just engage. We don't normally require them to do anything kind of more specific than that, really. Mm-hmm. So it's just sort of about making it as fun as possible and as easy as possible for them to respond.
Okay. And Vincent, your community is sort of very user-to-user help, really, isn't it? So. Is that what you rely on, really, just people's...
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we don't even have moderators. I'm not a big fan of moderation. Obviously in extremely large communities, like Mushy Monsters, you probably have to do that. I don't know what your volume is that you get. Our volume is pretty large, but it's probably not to the extent of Mushy Monsters. But yeah, I mean, for me, moderators look at negative content, whereas, I like to look at the positive content. So I invented a new role, which I call educators, and my staff actually goes in and actually finds the positive stuff that happens within a community and amplifies that, either via private message or publicly, to constantly reinforce the positive stuff that happens within that community. And that's actually kind of stopped all the negative stuff happening, and we rely on our community to flag anything negative. And only then will we actually look at it and to see whether actually it's necessary to be moderated or not. And we can actually see that, roughly sort of like 0.5% of any content is being flagged, and it doesn't even mean whether it's, actually someone swearing or not. It can be any content in terms of, maybe moving a thread to a different forum or something like that.
Do you share that the positive comments internally as well to educate the rest of your company?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we continue to try and we actually try to stay a very small company. So yeah, I mean, the whole business is very involved in the community. Literally from the CEO, up to all the way down to, anyone really in the company.
Mm-hmm. Peter, have you got an opinion on this?
Yeah, I think one of the things I think that's useful to do, I heard this called recently the bozo filter, which is to not let people know when you're taking their comments down so you don't get the reaction. And it works in chat as well, if their chat's being filtered and it's quite offensive. Don't tell them it was blocked, make them think it was spoken. Facebook do this. I don't know if people realise a lot of the spam bots, if Facebook censors them or you're a new user and you're not trusted, often those posts aren't visible to other people, only visible to people in your community. So you think it's on the wall, but it isn't. And that's a great way of just calming things down, I think. So, not stoking the fires of those kind of problems is one way to deal with it.
Yeah, so taking the oxygen out of situations seems to be a good way to handle things for people in general.
I mean, in terms of negative, comments, to hide them basically from the rest of the community, but they can still see them. I think that works really well as an approach. Mm-hmm. What we often do is, when there is someone very negative in that community, is to actually talk to them and find out why they're being like they are. Because for me, it's sort of like, if people spend that amount of time being negative in your community, if you can turn them around, they can spend that same amount of time being very positive in your community. And we've had some really great results in that.
Yeah. Fantastic.
There are many different ways on doing it. There are obviously ways in terms of the tools that we use via Lithium platform, where you can set accepted solutions. But very often what we do is we actually go behind the scenes in terms of private messages and lift out the positive stuff that they said, and then basically compliment them on that, but also talk with them in terms of, have you thought about follow-up questions? Have you thought about adding in this information or that information? Obviously, our community is very much based on helping others in terms of customer service, because we don't have traditional customer service channels. You can't call a customer service with us. It's the community that helps the rest out. So obviously, that's what we focus on a lot. And in terms of discussions, if people have really good points or they have a really good way of explaining themselves, we then also obviously talk to them and get more information out of them, or even feed them more information in terms of, right, this is our thoughts on it, or this is some additional information that you can use, that kind of stuff.
So that's private, not public.
It's often private. Yeah.
So the next one up, I know, is one that probably has plagued anybody who's managed a community, and that's how do you deal with the sensitive situations that arise, such as a suicide threat or declarations of self-harm or domestic abuse? What are your tips on dealing with that? And where should we start? Let's start with Claire there.
Again, it's difficult for a kids site because obviously any kind of discussion around that kind of issue it's not appropriate for that to be on our forums, and we can't have the same motivation of like wanting people to talk about that and kind of the community helping each other with that kind of issue, because it's upsetting for the smaller, well, it's upsetting for anybody to have to read that, but especially when there's smaller kids reading that content. So in the first instance, we do have to remove it, heartless as that might sound. If we have if we are concerned and we have enough information, then we might contact the player, or obviously take it to the authorities depending on what's more appropriate. Really, we have to deal with each case. It's a case-by-case basis because it's so sensitive. We do also have the problem that, for example, if a child was talking about abuse and we felt that it was real, we can't just contact them via their email address. It could be, if they're talking about parental abuse, we can't then send it to the email address that could be directly to the parent. So we have to be very, very sensitive to that as well. It's something that I'm interested, I speak to CEOP and the authorities about quite a lot about what the right way to deal with those kind of things are. And I think in the UK as well, it's quite challenging because I think it's quite clear what sort of issues go to CEOP, but around kind of self-harm and suicide, and I don't think that's necessarily as clear who you're supposed to report those things to in kind of each different occasion. So really we have to deal with them all on a case-by-case basis, but in the first instance we just have to take it off.
I suppose health community, do you have these issues popping up?
Yeah, patients like me being a health community, this situation actually happens more often than anybody would like to see. And the community is really great and supportive, and they take over and offer support, solidarity, crisis resources, and encourage members to get help. Now thinking of how it could impact the rest of the community, it is up to us also to tag that thread and let people know that this could be a trigger warning. This is a hard thread to read. And we do hear from members that it is hard, but that patients like me could have saved their life because of the support of people like them.
Do you have an internal process to sort of put educational messages through to users who are declaring those?
I think as staff members it can be really hard at first to read these messages. So we certainly talk about the threads amongst ourselves. We have crisis resources. We actually use the Post Secret has a very great wiki that is worldwide, all of the resources available to each person, and send those out. We also, again, if a member posts and it might be late at night, we see another member's on, instead of being the moderator saying, oh, you should go get help, we can ask another member that we know is helpful to say, hey, over here, this member's having a hard time. Would you care to comment? And they normally say, yeah, thanks for letting me know. I helped him out. I hope they're okay.
Okay.
So you do actually let your members try and help them, talk them out of situations?
Absolutely, yeah. Unlike children's community, we don't screen. Those posts are allowed. Those posts are welcome.
Do you find if it can sort of turn the atmosphere of a forum if you've got a lot of that sort of very depressed suicidal talk going on?
Sure. I think that, again, going back to members being able to control their own experience, people can hide those threads if they wish to not see them. For others, yeah, it may be too hard for them to read, and they can just go into another forum room that isn't, say, the mental health and behavior room, and have different conversations.
Okay. What do you do at GIFGAF then, Vincent?
Well, for us, we leave the thread there. We don't remove it, but we do keep a very, very close eye on what is being said there. And for us, we don't actually encourage people to actually try and help people who have suicide issues or that kind of stuff, simply because I am worried that if it goes wrong, then there might be a blame laid at this person's feet in terms of like, well, you tried to help them, but clearly you didn't. So for me, it's like the only way in which I would like people to help is by giving them the right, resources, telling them to go to the Samaritans or that kind of stuff. And we do that ourselves as well, very publicly.
Yeah.
And obviously any negative comments that are on those types of threads are immediately removed. So that's the only time when we actually heavily-handed moderate. But aside from that, I don't actually want people to actually go in and say, all right, have you thought about this or that, or actually try and help them. And what I see in our community, because it is a very helpful community, is that people basically try and move the conversation away from the thread and basically say, oh, why don't you private message me and we'll talk about it, that kind of stuff. Again, I really try and discourage people from taking on the responsibility of someone who's, clearly unstable. I find that a very, very scary situation.
And, for Peter, I guess one of the issues is actually picking this stuff up in the first place. If you've got a large community, and if you've got a large community of teens, you're going to see, I'm going to kill myself, probably about every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So
I think the key there, it's about volume, and you will change your approach depending on the volume. So some of the things we do for our customers is if those kind of threats come through, they cut through every single queue and go straight to the top. And also I'd encourage people, if they are building those kind of systems, push those out to email, because you don't want someone to come back to log into the tools to go, oh, we had a suicide threat yesterday, 6 hours ago, it's the top of the queue. It needs to bring them back. So SMS, email. But then if the volume goes up, you are going to be dealing with a lot of things. People are going, oh, Lady Goo-Goo's off the site, I'm going to kill myself. These are just benign threats, but it could be I'm going to kill myself, my parents are being cruel to me. And no tool can get that subtlety in context. It can pick up that there's a threat and they're threatening to kill themselves. We use a system of profiling. If the volume is too high, then the repeated effects of someone saying that is more likely that is a risk than a one-off comment. I know that means that you've got to triage, you've got to prioritize things, but that volume, you've got no choice. You have to prioritize. Yeah. And that's the mechanism we take.
And how do you handle the situation after it's prioritized for you in the queue?
What it means is it comes to someone's attention immediately. Now, how someone reacts to that in terms of what the policy is on the site is purely up to how they choose to deal with it. I would encourage communities to take an active involvement in trying to help, and not just kind of go, get it off the site, we don't want that on there. But it is up to each community and legislation in different areas as well. I think that has to be taken on board.
I kind of think one of the issues is it isn't, as Claire said, it's not particularly clear for community managers what they should do when they've got a real threat. I have tended to counter them with emailing that person with links to advice channels in whichever country they're in. But I have had cases where I've done police reports, and I had a case where a girl was spamming sort of a link to webcam, and on webcam she was actually holding a gun to her head. She was in the States, and I was shocked. And in those sorts of situations you suddenly think, okay, I really need a process for what's going to happen if this happens to me again. And in that case, I tracked down the police that were most local to where she was, and it was in Texas, and I think Bex will probably start grinning here at this point. The answer that I got was, oh, just give her this number. Okay, she's holding a gun to her head. It's all right, just give her this number. What do you do then? At that point, you've done all you can, and I suppose you've also need to think about the other members of your community once you've done all you can. That it's definitely an area where I think everybody needs an internal process for when this happens, rather than being caught on the fly. And
it is important to have those policies in place. I want it to be clear that we don't just remove it and then that's just that. We have to remove it because we deal with small children. But it's important that your moderation team are aware of how to note something more serious, where that should be escalated to, when to escalate it, when to escalate it right now. You need to have really clear policies in place for that.
Yeah. So the next one I've got is actually comes from an experience. I was looking at a brand, and I won't name who they are, on Facebook the other week, and they're a retail brand, and they're there answering customer service questions about their product to the people on the page. And there is a group of women from a famous women's community, whose name I won't mention, but they get mentioned quite a lot. And they've basically got a campaign group going against this brand. And it's sitting there, they're all day posting every single time a customer service person responds to anybody, they're straight in there. Not unpleasant, but obviously pointing out anything they can that's negative about that brand, suggesting people go elsewhere. So really my question is, How do you manage that situation if you've got people who are actually absolutely intent on sort of complaining about you everywhere possible in a nice way so you can't get them on being abusive? How do you cope with it? I'm going to start here with Vincent.
Yeah, for me, obviously being a mobile network and we involve our customers in pretty much all decisions that we make, we see quite a bit of cynicism. So people just simply don't trust us, they don't believe us, they don't believe we're genuine and that we're actually asking for their advice. We've had things like, price rises where we're actually asking our community, so what do you think is fair? This is the situation, we need to stay sustainable, so we need to up the prices, but how much do you think, it should go up? And then we get very cynical people who basically say, well, you've already made the decision, so why even ask us? When we clearly haven't, we just said, look, this is the situation, why else would we bother asking you? But it's, so you get those types of situations, where people are very cynical or simply don't trust your brand anymore. At which point, for me, the only option is to either invite them over or for me to go to them. Obviously, I always try and invite them over so they can come into the company and talk with everyone, because we are that open, which has worked very well in the past. At this moment, we've never actually had to go to anyone. Often when it gets to that point, either they actually accept the invitation or they stop talking, because we obviously publicly invite them as well. And at which point, if they don't accept, I can just continue to go back and say, well, I asked you to come over, you don't want to talk to us, so you can continue doing this, but it's a bit pointless if you don't even want to enter into a conversation.
That's quite a good way to call their bluff, actually, isn't it? Yeah.
I think that's a real challenge, and I'd be interested to speak to Josh more about that. That we're really in an environment at the moment, I think, that people are using social networking quite often to escalate situations that we have actually already dealt with, and that's something that is a real challenge for us, I think, that someone takes to Twitter because they haven't got their own way, and there's a good reason for that, but that bit's the public part, and I think that's a real challenge at the moment. I think, personally, I just think the solution is making sure that the policies are really clear for everybody, and the staff that you're expecting to deal with it understand the reasons behind it so they can respond really quickly. But it is a problem, because as a business, obviously, Twitter and the public forum is a real concern, and I think that's something that we try and communicate a lot to our different departments of the business. I think it's really important that we don't react differently on Twitter or Facebook or wherever it happens to be, just because someone's complaining publicly. If the policy makes sense, then we should be happy to say on Twitter and Facebook, no, you can't do X and this is why. If the policy doesn't make sense, then obviously you need to change it. But it's important to be consistent.
What do you do if you've had somebody go for your customer service and you've given them the final answer, or they've been swatted by your moderators and been given the final answer? What do you do then if they go back into a public channel like Twitter and basically relay a completely different version of events than what happened, that portrays you in a very negative light?
It's difficult. I just say to keep it as simple as possible. You don't want to aggravate the situation anymore, but I think if it's been escalated and someone's just saying the same thing over and over again, and you feel that you've made the right decision, I don't think you can be scared of saying that, sort of saying this issue is resolved. And doing it publicly, if they're making the choice to have that debate publicly, as long as you feel that what you've done is the right decision, then it should be okay to say that publicly as well. Thankfully, we don't get an awful lot of them. I mean, obviously the kids, our main pages, our kids are using them and they're using it for fun stuff. So I'm glad to say that I don't have very many of them, but I do think it's a real challenge, and it is something that we've seen. I've even had people, even friends saying, well, I didn't get my own way, so I posted on Twitter. And I think that's a real challenge that hopefully all companies can be a bit more consistent about, because I agree that it's really important to respond to those messages, but it's also important that that's not just a fast-track way to get a different answer.
Don't you think the community takes care of itself? Sorry. Hello. We're recording this. I wrote this long email to everybody last night, and I speak into the mics. Don't you think the community takes care of that kind of thing itself? Like, we do get actually quite a bit of that, and especially in the last 2 days, it's been a real hassle. Somebody didn't like the answer they got, And so there's all this, I've taken my child off Moshi Monsters, me too, blah, 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 on Twitter and Facebook. And I mean, we have somebody who monitors it all day long and says, I'm so sorry that you're unhappy. But honestly, if somebody, it's like somebody running through the streets screaming, you know, the Russians are coming, or whatever it is that they scream now. So that maybe that wasn't politically correct, but I don't know. But you know, after a while, people are like, "Oh, not them again." So I think that often the community takes care of itself when somebody's just on and on.
Actually, I think if you've been a really, you know, if you've been a popular community manager, you kind of get people riding to your defence. As you know, I spent a while at Habbo, and I often used to see on forums people posting, she banned me and she killed my cat and strung up my grandmother and she's responsible for the breakdown in the Middle East and everything. And then you'd usually get people saying, no, she's really good. Actually, she was really nice to me and she did. So I do agree that to a certain extent you can kind of let them sort it out.
And again,
we had a Sun article with a big rat on the front page, and right next to it was, you know, dangerous Moshi Monsters, and that was like a year or so ago, and all these people came to our defense online and said that this is rubbish and blah blah blah. So that really makes a big difference.
Yeah, we get a lot of that on GiveGav as well, like our community defending us in the decisions that we make. However, we do have a deadlock process in place as well. So basically, you know, because they can create, I don't know, 15 Twitter accounts and just spam your whole Twitter feed full of, you know, GiveGav's crap or whatever. But at that point, you know, we basically say, look, you know, we've tried to, fix the situation. You're obviously not happy with how it's ended up. But we can then give them a deadlock letter, which they can fill in, and they can send it to the Ombudsman or the ASA or Ofcom or whatever organization is appropriate, and they can then look at that. And that basically is like also a public statement of like, look, you know, we can obviously not work it out between us, but there are organizations who can. And, you know, well, we've never actually lost any complaints.
So
okay, if what you're saying makes sense, then everyone's going to see that as well.
Yeah.
And that's why I think
it's about
important
being
not to be
very
afraid.
public.
Exactly.
Definitely.
So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to move on to one that's one of these lighter blue touch paper and stand back questions, and that is human versus automatic moderation. Which is best, and is there a place to both? And I'm going to start off down the end there with Peter.
You'll see in my talk later on that there is no replacement for people, but scale is the issue. Okay, if I have a forum, maybe a Facebook page with 500, 600 comments on a day, I can review that, and I should. And if that's my customer service channel, absolutely I should. But you know, we have some customers that get 300 messages a second and get user reports one a second. That's one user reporting another user every single second. At that point, all bets are off. I'm not going to go through every single user report. So that's our stance on that, is that it all depends on scale. At high volumes, you've got to start using tools to help you prioritize and triage that debt. And the example of user reports is a great example. This sparked off an interesting debate on the eMint forum, was that in that scenario, what else am I going to use? Because if I just sit there and go through this queue, I might be missing genuine reports. So what we allow is for the combination of user evidence plus system evidence plus the number of times it's been reported to change the profile of that user. So now if I've been reported 5 times and the system has seen something in what you said, that's at the top of the queue. If something's been reported once by no one else and there's no system evidence, it's at the bottom of a very long queue, and if you get through it all, fine, you'll get to it. But the reality is no one can afford the moderation teams to go through that long tail of what is often people just clicking the button for the hell of it. And there are mitigations you can do in user interfaces to make that less of a problem. Ask them for a reason. Don't let them put free-form text in. And try and make sure they're aware of the responsibilities of reporting, and controversially profile them. If they abuse that button, they're going to get moderated. They're going to be brought back in. But at the end of the day, technology can prioritize and triage, and it's not going to remove the need for responses. You know, suicide threats, we're going to send out an automated response, tell them to get themselves off to the Samaritans. No, someone needs to take care and have a look at that and decide what the right response is. So
Okay.
What for you is the dividing line in terms of volume when you when you need to start using automated tools to do this?
Budget.
Well, yeah, I've got unlimited budget.
Yeah.
So what volume are we talking about?
No, I wasn't being flippant. It really is down to budget. I mean, it starts turning, at my view, in when you're getting reports, for example, 1 a second, and comments are coming in, and chat lines are coming in more than 1 a second. I think that's turning to the point where you can't. You take some of the heavily trafficked Facebook pages. One post can pull up 30,000 comments within an hour. That's a lot of people to go through every comment just to see hi, cool, like it, loving it. So I think at that point you've got to triage.
I think, it's a factoid. In my last job, we used to get around 80,000 user abuse reports a day. Yeah, that 80,000. And we did a bit of a study on that, and actually only 12% of them were reporting anything that was actually an issue. That most of them are simply trivial. So I'm kind of on the probably slightly more towards the automated side of the fence, simply because I've had to deal with that volume, and I find it impossible. But I'm guessing, where do you guys stand on this with your communities?
I think there has to be a place for both on a site like on our scale. We absolutely need humans to read the information, to be active in the forums, to really see what people are talking about, to try and predict problems before they happen, which is something that software can't do, that moderators are very qualified to do. I know such an event's coming up and this is going to, something that happens publicly, someone famous dies, our monitoring software wouldn't be able to deal with that. So you definitely need humans there to keep it going, to have a really good quality community. But on a scale like ours, you couldn't have a children's site without having word filters, and the monitoring software for us is just absolutely invaluable. It means that we can get to the really serious problems much, much quicker. We just couldn't get through that, trawling through reports. And the other challenge with kids' sites is that they really do press the report button all the time. Their idea of what's serious is very, very different to what everyone else's is.
Hello, I'm bored, can you talk to me?
Yeah, I mean, like the Lady Goo situation is a classic example. Like that was the end of the world to them. They'd be reporting anyone that was talking about it. That can't get in the way of actually serious things that are going on elsewhere on the site.
Do you think there's room to just, as harsh as it sounds, ignore a section of reports? Would you ever do that?
I'm guessing with automated tools you do that, right? I mean, that's how an automated tool works.
Well, I suppose it depends what you term as trivial and what your priorities are, but would you be happy as community managers just saying, forget those, we're not going to deal with those sorts of queries?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on the content. Like Moshi Monsters or Hebo, there are not that many communities around that deal with that type of volume. Yes, I guess you will have to start ignoring certain types of abuse reports simply because you can't deal with them all. Then it's just a question of you simply don't have the staff, and you wouldn't ever be able to get the staff to deal with all of them. But yeah, preferably you'd have a human looking at every report that comes in. But yeah, again, it's a matter of scale.
I think in addition to a matter of scale, it's where you are in the community building process. And if you're earlier on trying to build a community and engage it, your users are going to know if that's an automated message or if that's a human. And as us all being consumers ourselves, we probably have a preference to which we'd prefer to hear from a brand. So if you're looking to build your community, you should really get in there and advocate for your brand, be a personality.
It's also saying you'll see a massive difference in, especially gaming and children's worlds, where if it's a free-to-play or it's subscribed, often, or if there's an element of subscription, like you had to get your pass into this site or earn your pass into this site, that community doesn't want to get kicked out. They're paying a subscription. Things might get heated, that's going to happen. But on free-to-plays, the problem are the tire kickers, the people that are just going to come in and troll. Just for the hell of it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that like doing that. And that changes the shape of the community massively.
Yeah, I guess in GIFGAF's case, part of, GIFGAF, old squat, it's basically an old Scottish word for mutuality. You do something for us, we do something for you. So at GIFGAF, you get payback points. So you participate in the community or in any other way, you actually earn points, and those points you can turn into cash. So obviously that's a bit of a deterrent as well in terms of, if you get banned, then, you lose all your points.
Yeah.
So that certainly helps.
So we've got 10 minutes left on this. So are there any questions from the... Well, we've got one over here. Oh.
Hello. So, as far as ignoring reports, we get, on my community, we get persistently argumentative members, and we do ignore their reports because it's just another one from this loony, so we ignore their reports to dissuade them from reporting. But one thing we suffer from is people that will unplug their router and just get another IP address. And they will call themselves angry person 1 on Yahoo, angry person 2 on Yahoo, so we ban the word angry person, and they call themselves I'm going to kill you 1 on Yahoo, I'm going to, ultra-violence 1, that's a person that's ongoing right now in my music technology forum. And he's a grade A lunatic, and it's severely impacting moderator time. And I think these bad users, they know that time is money, and they can hurt the admin of the forum by wasting their time down the drain with dealing with them. So I have to have the 2 moderators on the sort of psychiatrist's couch and listen to them moaning about this person. But it's, don't really know what to tell them. I'm a little bit stuck with what to do now. Have you got any tips for someone that can change their IP address?
We'll drop a cookie and then keep the cookie and use that to identify them. Obviously people know how to clear cookies as well, so it's one extra step. Another step, although Apple are eliminating Flash, is to use Flash cookies, which are even harder to remove, but usability on iPads mean they won't get a Flash cookie on an iPad. But if they're on a PC, drop a cookie, drop a Flash cookie, use that to re-identify them. When they come back in, you can see immediately, this is the same computer at least. It's probably 99.9% the same person.
Okay, yeah, because we use cookies for multiple registrations under the same name. We're using that right now.
Yeah.
But I'll look into some sort of auto ban with that. Can you apply a cookie to one particular member or something? Yeah, you probably can.
No, it's just a machine. You're really just going to, well, just the browser actually on the machine. So you're going to re-identify the browser from the same machine.
Right.
I think we've got another question somewhere.
Thanks for the Flash cookie. We'll give that a try.
So going back to a discussion you guys were having earlier with how do you deal with the crazy people who are just spamming Twitter and starting other sites, how do you, especially for people in larger companies, how do you convince your PR department to let you reach out to those people? So for the Huffington Post, we have sites dedicated to proving that we are anti-Semitic and Zionist, feminist and misogynist, left-wing hippies and right-wing nut jobs. And so we get accused of these things, but PR won't let us reach out to them. And I haven't been able to convince them that that's actually the right way to deal with those. So have you guys ever run into a PR wall? And how have you gotten past that?
Any answers there?
We're quite lucky. We really do just try and communicate within all the different departments together and try and work out what the solution is for all of us. I mean, if it's a customer service issue, then obviously it falls under us, and we can kind of consult everyone. I mean, communicate within the departments really and come to an agreement. Like something like Lady Gaga, we had all the key stakeholders involved, decide what the response was going to be, and we all go with it. It's important to be consistent and to make sure we're kind of looping everyone in, really. I mean, definitely, I'm sure our PR would not be happy if we just sort of went out and responded to that without mentioning it to anybody. And if it's something that's got legal difficulties, then obviously you have to be considerate of that. But yeah, I think just communication within the teams, really. But I'm very lucky. that our departments do that?
I've had a bit of all of it, actually. It's sort of thinking about it. Oh, Beck said at Habbo, you'd get people who would call you all the names under the sun, but luckily they'd tend to do it on websites using your own graphics, so that was usually straight out with the legal letters. Thinking before that, AOL. Well, they were used to
AOL
everybody
owns us.
slamming them.
AOL
They didn't
owns
do anything.
us, so I feel your pain.
So there you didn't do anything. They were used to it, and the one I was at before that, which was a BT ISP, they let you go out, they let you reach out. So it seems to be. What are you guys? Are you allowed to?
Yeah, I mean, we're just fully open and honest in everything we do, so we certainly reach out. So yeah, from me, that'd be, the only advice I'd be able to give is simply, keep talking to them and try and convince them that that is the right way to do. But, very often as well, that those people who make comments like that or set up websites, that kind of stuff, they don't get that much traction though. It's often, seen as like, right, clearly a nutter, and you just leave it.
Yeah, we luckily have not had any situations like that, but I'd really want to ask, is that harming your community, and is it worth the effort of trying to reach out?
Yes and no. So their traffic is tiny in comparison to ours. They can't really make a dent in our community, but they keep coming back. They are members of our community as well, and so they drive people to that site, and it just creates this cycle of negativity that we just don't want. And the pushback that we get is, if you engage them, then you're just giving them more of a platform to come back at you, and they'll just publish the email that you sent them, and then it's, all of the other news sites that hate the Huffington Post are going to pick up on it, and so like everyone's just afraid of reaching out because they don't want that transparency and that.
Well, like we do, can't you just invite them over? I mean, often when you do invite them over, and
they
I've
won't.
certainly seen that.
That's the thing, is I'm like, I would like to pick up the phone and call this guy, and he's like, no, do not talk to them.
Yeah, well, I guess that's your job to convince them as to why that would actually work. In terms of, often when you do actually get them, you'll find that they're actually very, quiet and just sit there and sort of let you talk at them, rather than
the conversation and put it on YouTube, and
they might record the conversation, put it on YouTube. Some
that's
people.
Fine. I've got nothing to hide in the conversation.
Trust them, I mean.
Well, I mean, I can trust us. I can trust what we say.
Don't trust anybody anywhere.
In terms of what you'd say, that's fine to go out. I mean, I'm not saying anything weird.
But the community moderator is not a trained orator for their organization, which is the problem you just hit here with the Huffington Post guy.
I think if that's the way you think you should go and reach out to them, I suppose with your PR department, if you sit there and you give them a big list of every single thing that you've tried and sort of make a case, well, we think they're damaging our community, please can we get out and talk to them, and just keep hammering away till they get so bored of you they're going to say yes. That's the only thing.
And this is Brian Klingham with Autodesk. And I just wanted to share something that I think about as well, and it was a personal experience I had in our community where we had someone who was very negative, and I wrote a reply to him, and in my emotions when I wrote it was very neutral, calm, and I said, really, if you find this community not giving you a positive experience, there are plenty of other places you can go. And so I felt like I was conveying it in a neutral way, but then someone else in the company read it to me in an angry voice, and it made perfect sense. So another thing we have to remember is the danger of this written communication. You don't get the nuance, the body language, the inflection, the tone. So it's just something to keep in mind.
AOL volunteers used to be told that they had to smile from the wrists down. So that's how I type an email. It's grind your teeth up there. It's, what actually comes out. It can so easily. If somebody's got a grudge, they're going to take any nuance and try and twist it. So.
Yeah, so that's why I like a lot of the words I've heard from Vincent about. It's really about being open, but also reaching out to these people and trying to have a conversation. So, that might be something as well for your PR department that, to write something is a little different than reaching out and talking to the person. You can connect better. So.
I'm afraid to say, I think we've got time for one more, I've been told from the sidelines there. So has anybody got another one? Up there.
Hi, my name's Martin, and I work at a company called State currently, but I used to work at Yahoo Answers. And I sort of wanted to come back a little bit because I feel your pain over Gearsluts. So I've done a bit of advanced troll fighting over the years. It's an exciting sport and pursuit. And in some ways, I think Peter's comments are great about the technology side of things with cookies and so on. But really, with really extreme trolls, beyond the normal levels of these that you can get to at scale, it gets to a bit like an arms race. And all you're doing really is putting ever increasingly more complex and advanced barriers in their way and hoping that is one barrier further. And then, of course, it's a Darwinian situation. It's the survival of the fittest. There'll always be one troll who's more extreme than that, who will get past that, and almost take it as a sport to fight them. And so you can think of it as ever-increasing levels of how you can throw more tech at them. But to me, the solution there isn't really, it's almost like conflict resolution, I'm sure. It's not really in the armament side, it's in the resolution with the user. The only way that user is going to stop being an extreme troll in your community is if you convince him not to be anymore. So as much as you can make things difficult, and those things, tech solutions will work, is to reach out to speak to that user and to try and find a way to bring them on the inside, which I think some of the panel talked about a little bit here as well. Of turning them around and having them become brand advocates. And I know it sounds almost insanely idealistic, but I have seen it done with some of the most aggressive and strong users. And you use the word crazy and insane and so on, but in these cases, I don't think they are often these guys are literally insane. They're just much stronger than you would normally expect.
I guess the problem is, though, there's some, if you've got people trolling you from 4chan or Anonymous,
right,
you're not going to be winning them over any time this century. So that's what they're there for, is to create maximum hassle.
Yeah, I mean, but then are you going to win them with a tech solution either if they come from Anonymous? And so, I mean, I would always try at least this approach, which is they take it offline and try and deal with the open channels of dialogue with them and try and work it out what it is that they would want. Because a lot of these guys do want attention and that will temper their behavior. And other levels of tech solutions to ban them might also aggravate them further and push them to go to more extreme lengths. And the psychological approach is the
phoning me at home, or I'm trying to give the kids a bath or, feed the children or something like that. So this guy's very extreme. I do deal with people and reach out to them and stuff, so it's not just a dictatorship type thing, but this person is particularly bad, but I'll think about it, I
mean, the example here of inviting them into the office is an amazing way of calling their bluff. Maybe you might want to think twice about doing that with everyone, but there are situations when people will act really aggressive online. But when you talk to them in real life, and this is where customer service and social overlap really, people don't act like that if you ring them up and say, hey, I'm listening now, can I help? And they're like, oh.
But there's one thing I can't remove from the situation is there's a lot of guys on my forum, so guys don't like each other. So I can get perhaps the loony guy I call loony, to like me and we have an understanding. But I don't know if I can change his opinion of other people that he hates and wants to destroy.
Absolutely, but then it's about talking to him and finding out how you can get him to deal with these other people, right? So I've had people where I've literally invited them, gone out for a pint and a lunch, and I've talked to them about their behavior on our boards, and simply say, look, this is what you're doing, and this is obviously causing a lot of harm, but it's also creating a lot of negativity for you, and therefore people react to everything you say. And so I've had people who started off with a new username, a new identity, so to speak, and really changed their behaviors, and they've become complete advocates.
I'm going to have to cut across you all, I'm afraid, guys, because we've got another session coming up, so we'll have to call it a day on this one. But if you've got any questions of panelists, I'll have herded them out that way, and you can catch up with them. Okay, many thanks.